Imagine a world where the US dollar is no longer the default currency for most global trade, where emerging economies have more influence over lending, infrastructure, and financial rules, and where countries can settle more business directly with each other. That's the possibility often discussed around BRICS, the bloc that began with Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa and has since expanded to include additional member countries. This isn't a prediction that BRICS will replace the existing system overnight. It's a question. Could BRICS gradually reshape how money, trade, and power move through the global economy? What is BRICS? BRICS was originally a grouping of large emerging economies: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and later South Africa. In recent years, the bloc expanded to include additional countries from the Middle East, Africa, and beyond. Together, BRICS countries account for a large share of the world's population, a substantial portion of global GDP measured by purchasing power, major energy producers and consumers, important commodity exporters, and some of the world's fastest growing large economies. The group isn't a military alliance or a single economic union. Think of it as a political and economic forum where members try to coordinate on trade, finance, development, and global governance. Why the dollar still dominates. To understand the BRICS debate, we first need to understand the current system. The US dollar remains the dominant currency for international trade, central bank reserves, global finance, many commodities such as oil, and cross border payments. This dominance exists not just because the US economy is large, but because global investors trust the depth of US financial markets, the liquidity of dollar assets, the legal and institutional framework behind them, and the network effects of everyone else already using dollars. That means replacing the dollar is extraordinarily difficult. Most economists view sudden replacement as unlikely. The more realistic question is whether the dollar's share could gradually decline as alternative systems grow. The three channels through which BRICS could matter. 1. Trade in local currencies. Instead of invoicing everything in dollars, BRICS countries can settle some trade directly in currencies, such as the yuan, rupee, real, or others. If a Brazilian exporter sells goods to China and payment happens without converting through dollars, demand for dollar transactions in that trade corridor falls. Important nuance. This does not mean local currencies become global reserve currencies. It simply means more bilateral trade bypasses the dollar. 2. Alternative financial institutions BRICS created the New Development Bank NDB, which finances infrastructure and development projects. If the NDB grows significantly, it could provide an additional source of funding alongside institutions such as the World Bank and regional development banks. Again, the key word is additional. At present, it is not replacing the global financial architecture, but adding another node to it. 3. Payment system diversification. Countries increasingly worry about dependence on a single payment network. BRICS members have discussed ways to improve cross border payments, reduce transaction costs, and increase resilience if sanctions or financial disruptions affect access to existing systems. Even modest diversification can matter because global trade is enormous. Small percentage shifts represent hundreds of billions of dollars. What would change? If these trends continue, first, a more multipolar financial system. Instead of one overwhelmingly dominant currency and payment ecosystem, We could see several major currencies and networks coexist. Think less dollar replaced and more dollar less dominant than before. Second, greater bargaining power for emerging economies. If countries have more options for financing and settlement, they may have more leverage in trade negotiations and development planning. Third, shifts in commodity markets. Some energy or commodity contracts could be priced or settled in non dollar currencies, especially among countries with strong bilateral trade relationships. Fourth, changes in reserve management. Central banks might gradually diversify a portion of reserves into a broader mix of currencies and assets. Even small reallocations matter because reserve portfolios are massive. Now, for the part that often gets overlooked, BRICS faces major constraints. Different political systems members do not share a common ideology or governance model, competing strategic interests. Some members cooperate economically while competing geopolitically. Currency convertibility limits. Not all BRICS currencies are fully convertible or widely used internationally. Financial market depth. Dollar markets remain far deeper and more liquid than most alternatives. Institutional trust reserve currencies depend on legal predictability, transparency, and investor confidence. These factors make a rapid transition away from the dollar unlikely. Building a credible international financial ecosystem takes decades, not months. Three scenarios for the 2030s. Scenario 1, incremental diversification, most likely, according to many analysts, more trade settled in local currencies, modest reserve diversification, NDB grows gradually, dollar remains dominant but less overwhelming. Scenario 2, accelerated fragmentation. Geopolitical tensions intensify, sanctions and financial restrictions expand. Countries actively build parallel payment and settlement networks. Global finance becomes more regionally segmented. Scenario 3, limited impact. Internal differences prevent deeper coordination. Local currency trade remains niche. Global investors continue to prefer dollar assets overwhelmingly. BRICS stays politically important but financially secondary. So, could BRICS change the world economy? Yes, but probably not in the dramatic new currency replaces the dollar tomorrow sense often seen in headlines. The more plausible story is gradual change, more local currency trade, more diversified financing, more payment options, and a somewhat less centralized financial order. In that world, the dollar could remain the world's leading currency, while BRICS still reshapes the system around it. The key question isn't whether BRICS will suddenly overthrow the existing order. It's whether, over the next decade, it can create enough alternatives that countries no longer depend on a single financial highway for trade, lending, and reserves.